Imagine you're starting a new workday. You open the garage and quickly hop into your car to head to the office. But when you start the engine, the fuel gauge drops to empty. Suddenly you realize you completely forgot to fill up. Glancing around, you spot an old can of gasoline in the corner of the garage, one you bought about 3 months ago. Now you hesitate. Is gasoline that old still usable? So, gasoline, a refined fuel derived from crude oil that has rested deep underground for millions of years. Can it actually go bad?
The world's roads are packed with 800 million greedy vehicles, guzzling their way through 7 billion litres of petrol. Keeping the fuel lines flowing safely with this flammable liquid demands a potent mix of engineering brilliance, chemical wizardry, and mucky manual labour.
By common logic, gasoline comes from crude oil. So in theory, if crude oil can last for millions of years, gasoline shouldn't go bad. But in 1973, when the Arab oil embargo caused gasoline prices in the US to skyrocket, things played out differently.
We're all out of high test and regular gas. That's it. The lines are completely around the corner.
What is this? I'm in a line 2 hours here and I can't get gas? This is baloney.
In a wave of panic, some people rushed to buy and store gasoline. They filled anything they could find: plastic containers, paint cans, even large metal drums hidden in garages. Then just a few months later, when gasoline became scarce on the market, they excitedly brought out their stored fuel to use it.
The energy crisis is real. It is a clear and present danger to our nation.
The result? Many cars wouldn't start. Others would start briefly and then stall immediately, with fuel injectors clogged by a thick, sticky resin-like substance. That's when many people realized something seemingly illogical. Gasoline is not immortal like crude oil. To understand why, we need to look at their composition. If crude oil consists of hydrocarbon chains with about 20 to 70 carbon atoms or more, then gasoline is made up of much shorter chains, typically ranging from 5 to 12 carbon atoms. The reason is that longer hydrocarbon chains tend to evaporate less easily. So, in refineries, crude oil is cracked into shorter hydrocarbon chains, creating highly volatile molecules like hexane, C6. These very short chains can evaporate even at room temperature, allowing them to act as ignition fuel. When you start your car, the fuel injector sprays gasoline into a fine mist. Short hydrocarbon chains like C5 and C6 immediately evaporate, mixing with oxygen in the air to form a combustible fuel-air cloud. This vapor ignites from the spark plug, releasing heat, which in turn helps longer chains like C8 to C12 evaporate and burn, generating energy for the engine. But this same property is why gasoline degrades over time. As it sits, the lighter hydrocarbon chains gradually evaporate into the environment, leaving behind heavier ones. These heavier molecules settle and layer over each other. Oxygen can only interact with a very thin surface layer, making it difficult for the spark plug to ignite the fuel. It's like trying to burn a book, only the outer cover gets scorched, while the inside remains intact. The result is that when you put this gasoline into your engine, it becomes very hard to start. You may have to crank the engine for a long time. It might sputter and stall, or not start at all, even though the tank is still full. However, you might wonder, if a gasoline container is tightly sealed and stored in a garage, then in principle, gasoline vapor shouldn't be able to escape. And logically, that seems correct. When sealed, only a small portion of the gasoline can evaporate, so it shouldn't go bad. But the situation isn't that simple. Even when tightly sealed, gasoline can still undergo a process called oxidation. To make it easier to visualize, imagine there's a massive ancient tree in your yard. If you leave it as it is, that tree could stand for hundreds of years, solid and resilient. But one day you decide to cut it down. You use a chainsaw to slice the huge trunk into hundreds of small pieces of firewood to make it easier to burn. These smaller pieces of wood catch fire much more quickly and burn more intensely. Just like how the shorter hydrocarbon chains in gasoline, refined from crude oil, help your engine ignite instantly and power the car forward. But those smaller pieces of wood become much less durable. Over time, they oxidize and start to decay. Similarly, in crude oil, hydrocarbon chains mostly exist as stable single bonds. However, the refining process, breaking long chains into shorter ones, creates reactive points along these molecules. The issue is that oxygen in the air readily attaches to these reactive sites. So even if your gasoline container is tightly sealed, there's still some air trapped inside. And oxidation continues to occur. As a result, the hydrocarbon molecules in gasoline begin to degrade and stick together. To the naked eye, this appears as gum, a thick, sticky residue ranging in color from dark yellow to brown. At this stage, gasoline is no longer a clean liquid, but one filled with deposits. And once you pour this old gasoline into your engine, the fuel injectors can quickly become clogged. Modern injectors have extremely tiny openings designed to spray fuel into a fine mist, but these residues can easily block them. Fuel can no longer reach the engine properly, causing the car to shake violently and fail to start. That's also what happened across the United States in the 1970s.
In many places in the United States, measures are being taken now to deal with the crisis. One of these places is Wayne, Nebraska.
For more than a week, most of the streetlights have been kept off. It's an effort to save electricity because the town is running out of fuel to produce electricity.
So, for crude oil to become gasoline, humans have to break down its naturally stable structure. As a result, we get a liquid that is highly volatile and efficient, but also more vulnerable to oxidation and degradation. It's like choosing a carefully prepared, delicious meal that spoils quickly, instead of eating a hard, dry grain that can last for years, but is much harder to digest. So, how can you tell if gasoline has gone bad? You can identify it through its color and smell. Fresh gasoline is usually clear or pale yellow. As it oxidizes, its color gradually darkens, from light yellow to deeper yellow, then orange, and eventually a reddish brown, similar to strong tea. As for the smell, fresh gasoline has a relatively sharp but somewhat clean scent. However, degraded gasoline develops a sour, harsh odor, similar to old varnish or aged resin. On average, pure gasoline without ethanol can remain usable for about 6 months or even longer. If you add a fuel stabilizer, chemical additives designed to slow down degradation, you can extend its shelf life to 1 or 2 years. However, for ethanol-blended engines, the lifespan drops significantly to just 1 to 3 months. The issue is that most gas stations today no longer sell pure gasoline, but rather ethanol-blended fuel.
Ethanol is a single component chemical, C2H5O, and it makes a pretty good fuel because it has good combustion properties.
This means modern gasoline tends to go bad much faster than it used to. Ethanol is added by manufacturers mainly for environmental reasons. It helps fuel burn more completely and reduces carbon monoxide, CO emissions. However, ethanol has a strong tendency to absorb water. So the longer gasoline sits, the more ethanol molecules bond with moisture from the surrounding air, forming a water-alcohol mixture that settles at the bottom of the container. Visually, you can see the fuel separating into 2 distinct layers. And since the fuel pump intake is usually located at the bottom of the tank, when you try to start the engine, the first thing it draws in isn't gasoline, but this water-alcohol mixture. Engines can't combust water, so the car will stall immediately. So, fundamentally, gasoline is a relatively unstable fuel. The longer it sits, the more its effectiveness declines, and it can pose risks to your engine due to oxidation. Although you can extend its lifespan with additives, gasoline is ultimately meant to be used, not stored long-term. Using fresh gasoline not only helps protect your engine, but also ensures you get the best possible performance from this refined fuel. If you're curious about everyday things that people rarely understand, drop a topic in the comments and I might explain it next.